We challenge you to become part of the elite and the exclusive Elite Videographer, the series.
Today with us on the phone is Kris Simmons from MindYourVideoBusiness.com. And prior to founding FireEye Productions, which is what he owns, I think he actually changed the name of his business recently, but it's FireEye Productions. Kris worked as a freelance producer, director, videographer, and editor for several independent video production companies throughout the southeastern United States. In 2004, he was selected as Tennessee's SBA Young Entrepreneur of the Year, and over the years has won multiple awards from the Chattanooga Advertising Federation. This guy makes $100,000 a year on video production. He's probably the best video business owner I know. I was kind of skeptical in meeting him at first, but and seeing him and listening to him, I thought this was some kind of Tony Robbins fluff. So he is the real deal. This guy goes out there and does the work, and he has the experience to give out this information. It's not just head knowledge. He has the experience. So let's get into, he's on the phone. Okay, let's give him a call. Kris Simmons.
Hello, this is Kris.
Hey, Kris. Brian at the DV Show.
Hey, Brian. How's it going?
Okay. So let's jump right into this interview talking about what to charge clients. And we're actually talking about, we're having a series, and we're talking about the entire production process. And right now we're up to where we're invoicing the client. And during the conversation, during this previous podcast, I haven't really said what we should be charging. So now this is where you come in to kind of help us out in determining rates and what we base this fee on. I mean, you're a videographer in the Tennessee area, and you charge your clients a specific fee. I mean, I'm sure that you have, a rate card or something, but what do we base this fee on? How do we determine money that we should be charging our clients?
Well, I think part of it is to sort of look around and say, okay, well, what are the other videographers in the area charging? When I first started my company, I started out as a freelance videographer. That was pretty much all I was doing. And the only way to determine what I should be charging was to just ask questions. I mean, ask other people, hey, what do you typically charge for a day of your time, or for a half day of your time, and what all does that include? And, I tried to talk to more established videographers that have been around a long time to kind of get a feel for, okay, these are the guys that have 10-plus years experience, so this is what they're charging. And then I would try to talk to people that had been in the business maybe only 2 or 3 years to get a feel for what they were charging. And then I felt like, okay, well, my skill level is better than most of the people that have only been in the industry a couple years, but I'm not quite at the level of the guys that have been around 10, 20 years. So I'm going to try to make my rate maybe fall somewhere in the middle to the upper middle. So early on, maybe what that meant was if I was going to go out and shoot with my camera package, light kit, microphones, that kind of thing, I might charge $500 for a 10-hour day, because it was sort of the high end for a one-person camera crew back then, and really it's amazing how these rates haven't changed much even in 10 years. Back then a one-person crew was anywhere from, $800 to $1,200 on the high end, and the low end was anywhere from like $350 to $600. So I just always tried to fall in the middle. The thing is, there's obviously multiple ways to look at what you need to charge or what you want to charge, and a lot of it is based on what's your overhead. I mean, I'm sure I'll aggravate a lot of videographers listening to this when I say, just because somebody else charges a certain amount of money doesn't mean that you have to, and just because your competitor charges less than you doesn't mean that you should get irritated or aggravated because they charge less, and because the reality is everybody's business is different. If you have extremely low overhead, for instance, if you run your company out of your bedroom and you've got a laptop, a cell phone, and you keep your camera package in the garage, your overhead is virtually nothing.
Right.
So who's to say, who am I or who are you or who is anybody to tell that particular person what they should or shouldn't charge, depending on what the needs are for their family, or their particular business. If you've got a downtown office with multiple employees, I mean, yeah, you're going to have to be in the $1,000 to $1,200 a day range just to pay your bills.
Right.
But but again, if you're operating out of your house, you have a lot more flexibility in terms of what you should be charging.
Right. So you're saying basically base our fee on what your competitor is charging. So you're constantly checking out your competition.
I think that it's a good place to start. Again, you don't have to match it. I mean, sort of the conventional wisdom would say, look at what your competitor's charging and charge a little bit less. But, I mean, I've never really done that and have never really been, successful enough to say, oh, well, because I charged $50 less, that got me the job. And so I think that's just one way to look at it. If you're new to the industry, the best way to figure out what to charge is to do your research and figure out what other people are charging. I mean, I can say that for as long as I can remember, it was pretty standard for a two-person camera crew to run, $1,400 to $1,450 a day if you're working for another video producer or a production company on like a reality TV show or something. They come into town and they need a two-person crew for a day. That's what they expect to pay. $1,400 basically for a two-person crew.
Right.
Now, sometimes they might say, all we have in our budget's $1,200, and then it's just kind of up to you as a videographer to decide, well, is $1,200 guaranteed in my hand worth, taking the job? And in 99% of the cases, the answer is absolutely.
Right.
Now, for a one-person crew, it's pretty standard. I charge, usually around $1,000 for a full day for just me and my camera package. If it's an out-of-town crew and it's kind of an out-of-town client and it's sort of a last-minute deal, I'll try to get closer to $1,200 for a one-person crew, and I'm usually be successful with that. But kind of the key is that you want to charge as much as you think you're worth, and you want to do so in a way so that you're not leaving any money on the table, but you want to leave the conversation open with the client so that they don't automatically shut you down if the price you quote is too high. And what I mean by that is, I might say, well, my typical day rate is $1,200. Does that work for your budget? And if they go, man, that's a little more than we were thinking, then I say, okay, well, what do you have in mind? And then they might say, well, we really can't go any higher than $900. And I'll basically say, well, if I agree to $900, can you go ahead and cut a check for that, so that I can book this and know that, I'm not going to have to wait a long time to get paid. And usually, since I quoted the $1,200 first, they think they're getting a good deal at $900, so they're more than happy to go ahead and pay you via credit card or get a check in the mail to you ASAP.
Right.
And I've always believed that, fast money is better than more money.
It's true. Now, let me talk about perception for a second. And I read some of your emails. I go to your site often. I mean, you and I have talking over the years. You've been on the show a couple of times. Perception. Now, charging that $1,200 or that $1,000 kind of makes you look professional, right? I mean, charging rates that are too low makes you kind of look amateur. So putting this up front with the client, that it's all about perception.
Yeah, it really is, and a lot of it depends on the client's experience in hiring videographers. If you have a company that has never produced a video before and they're hiring your services, they really don't have any way of knowing the difference unless they're getting quotes from a couple other professional videographers and they notice that your rate is considerably less than what the other company's rates are. In that particular case, you'll have a couple different ways of looking at it. The client could very well look at it and go, well, these other companies are charging $1,000 a day to $1,200 a day, and this other guy is only charging $500. What's wrong with this other guy?
Right.
It's obvious that they're not in the same league as these other companies. So let's just see if we can get these other more professional companies to negotiate against each other to give us the best rate.
Right.
So they would just go ahead and throw your reel in the trash and delete your contact information because they've already stamped you as, not necessarily an amateur, but this guy is not, the caliber that we're looking for our big important company. In another case, particularly in this economy, if you've got a smaller business that feels like they really need a video, for a trade show marketing loop or something like that, if they look on your website and they like what they see and you're the $500 option against the $1,000 and $1,200 options, they might be willing to they're probably going to be willing to take a risk at $500 because their mindset's going to be, well, as long as I'm involved and I'm helping to craft this the way that I want it, $500 is worth the risk because that's less than half what the other guys are charging.
Right.
So you really just have to look at who your customer is, who your target market is. If a producer's calling you from Los Angeles and they need a crew for, a reality TV show next Saturday, don't charge $500. I mean, you need to charge
more than
what
that.
Most of the pros are going to be charging, or else they're definitely not going to consider you.
Right. Now, let me ask you this, Kris. Now, we're talking about perception and charging a rate, and never leaving money on the table is something that you mentioned as well. So when a client says, "Okay, my budget is $900," and then all of a sudden you say, "Yeah, okay, I'll go that low," doesn't that kind of make you look cheap also? I mean, doesn't that kind of make you look desperate in a way too?
Well, I think it makes you look, well, number one, it's kind of like who are you worried about looking at you that way in that particular conversation? I mean, if you're talking to the client and the client says, I know your rate's $1,200, but all I can pay you is $900, then my response is, well, that's lower than usual, but if you can cut me a check tomorrow, we can do it. And so the point is, they still perceive you as a high value service provider because you're not just giving them a $300 discount, you're making them pay you much faster than they would ordinarily pay you.
Right.
And so that's kind of there always needs to be hey, if I'm going to give you something, you need to give me something.
Right.
And what I'm giving them is a $300 discount, and what they're giving me is a check if I close the business tomorrow.
I like that.
Whereas if I was paying them $1,200, I might not get paid for 30 days.
Right.
Or really, the reality is it's going to be 45 to 60 days.
Right. So you're getting your payment right up front. I mean, that's an excellent answer. I like that. I thought I'd stump you there for a second, but you answered that well.
Well, I mean, there's kind of two tracks, and it's funny because I know sometimes my answers are like, well, if you do it this way, it's this way. If you do it that way, it's that way. But there really are parallel tracks. I mean, the bottom line is if you need that $900, do what you have to do to get it. I mean, and don't worry about what, John at the next Videographer Association meeting is going to think about you.
Right.
Because John's not putting food on your table. You are.
That's right.
And guess who the client's going to call next time when they need somebody in town.
That's exactly
right. So
right.
that's the other thing people really have to look at is the lifetime value of this client. Yeah, it's $900 now. It's $300 less. I'm not real happy about that. But guess what? A year later, they might need to come back in town, and they're not going to call 5 different videographers. They're going to call your cell phone because you've developed a relationship with them, and that's another $900, if not more.
Right.
And the key, too, to realize is when you submit that invoice needs to say $1,200 with a $300 discount if you receive payment by such and such day. And so that way in their records it shows that this person's a $1,200 a day kind of videographer, but he worked with us. We needed a lower budget. He was willing to work with us. So we're going to keep that in mind.
Right.
And subconsciously, I don't know how you guys do it, but if somebody gives me a discount and I know that their rates are usually more than that, I'm subconsciously going to try to find a way to pay them what their rate normally is.
That's right.
The next time around.
That's exactly
right.
Whether
it's in negotiations with my client or whether it's negotiations with my boss, if I'm working, if I represent a company that says, hey, listen, this guy for $900, he cut us a break, and his work was excellent. So I really think that we need to go ahead and do the $1,200 this time.
That's exactly right. And with my experiences too, with companies or smaller companies, they play the game. I mean, they play a game. I mean, they say, well, we can do it for $900, but really they probably have $2,000 budgeted. So they kind of play the game too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's always a game to play, and a lot of companies. I mean, the reality is we all need to be playing that game to some extent. I mean,
right.
Just because that an AV vendor usually charges $1,600 for a particular service. That's not going to keep me from asking him if he can do it for $14.
Right.
And and sometimes I'll say the same thing. Well, if I go ahead and cut you a check, can you give me a $300 discount? Understanding that fast money is better than more money in a lot of cases, particularly in a bad economy. And plus, it's just kind of, when you really look at what it's costing your business to go without that cash for 30 to 60 days, it's better to give them the discount anyway.
Exactly. Now, we're talking about, $1,000 for a day rate. I mean, is this fee should we always approach every project with this type of fee?
I think you approach that as a starting point. I mean, you really have to be, everything is about supply and demand. I mean, if you're totally booked and somebody calls you and wants you to do a shoot on Friday, but you already have a full day of editing scheduled, well, in order for you to do that full day of shooting, you're going to have to delay the edit another day, or you're going to have to come in and work after hours to finish the edit. So you're working 20 hours that day instead of just 8 or 10. So if that's the case and you've got a lot of work on the shelf, then you absolutely are going to hold strong to your $1,000 rate or your higher rate, $1,200 rate. But if you're, you open up your calendar and you're looking at a vast wasteland of nothing, then, I mean, you'd be crazy not to be flexible.
That's right.
Now, I've said for a long time, don't self-negotiate. Don't negotiate yourself down before you even have an opportunity to tell the client what you need. I mean, we do that all the time, or I used to. A client would call and leave a message, hey, we want you to help us shoot. Can you call me back? And I'm looking at my calendar, there's nothing there. Then I'm thinking, oh, man, I really need this job. I got to have this job. Well, maybe if I quote them $800, I'll get the job. No, $800 might be too much. How about $700? Yeah. And then so I call them, tell them I'll do it for $700, and then they come back and say, well, our budget's only $500.
Oh.
So right there, I've cut my rate in half.
Wow.
And I did most of the negotiation work for them.
That's right.
So instead, that's why, the approach that works for me is, well, my day rate for this service is $1,000. Does that work for your budget? And the answer is either yes or no.
Right.
Yes, it does. Great. Okay, let's go ahead and book this. And I mean, a lot of times I try to send the paperwork while I still got them on the phone, or at least within 10 minutes, while everything's hot. They're excited, because a lot of times the person on the other end of the phone doesn't want to keep calling people. They just want to go ahead and book the videographer and move on.
Right. Exactly. I've had that experience as well. Now, we were talking about standard industry rates as going as like a guideline or base rate to present to your clients. I know that some freelance videographers find out this standard industry rate and then purposely lowball. Is that a good thing to do?
Well, again, like everything else, it depends. I mean, if you're the guy whose overhead is very low, it's not going to hurt you necessarily to charge less than the other people. But does it win you any friends in the industry? Absolutely not. Our videographer is going to be lining up to help you out whenever you need help. Certainly, no way. There's no way people are going to go, hey, let's go help Kris out, because he undercuts us by $500 every time. I mean, in essence, if you create a business, or if you run your business where you're undercutting people by hundreds and hundreds of dollars, you're essentially creating an island where you're going to be the only person who lives there. And it might be okay most of the time, but there's going to be times where you really need the help from other people in the industry, and they're just not going to give it to you. I personally have never, severely cut my rates back, mainly just because I wanted to make more money. But I've definitely said, well, if I know company X charges $1,200, then I'm going to charge $1,100. And I felt like that was a pretty fair reduction without really damaging my reputation. And the reality is, a client's not going to tell a competitor, well, we gave Kris the job because he charges $100 less. But if I was $500 less, then they would tell the other videographer, hey, listen, this guy was like half your cost, so you were just way too much, and so at that point, then people are going to know, man, I'm out here, slashing throats just to try to make it happen. Now, in most cases, severely undercutting is just not a good idea for cash flow purposes. I mean, most videographers that undercut severely have absolutely no idea what it truly costs to run their business. And so by undercutting, number one, yeah, they might win a lot of work, but they're going to work so many hours just to try to finish that work, and their profit margins are going to be dismal. I mean, they might be working for like $8 an hour by the time it's over with.
No kidding.
If they're charging so much less, and more of that might be if they're also editing as opposed to just going out and shooting. But if we're talking about just shooting, it's funny because the industry says you really should be paying anywhere from $800 to $1,200 a day for a professional video crew, a one-person professional crew to come out and help you. Again, if I'm in my mid-20s or early 20s or even 30s, if I'm not married or I'm married but I don't have any kids and I live in a two-bedroom apartment and I drive a Camry, and I've really been smart about managing my expenses and my debt load. I mean, even if I can make $400 a day, that's a lot of money in a day, and so you just have to kind of, as a high-end videographer, it irritates me to know that there's guys out there charging so much less, but the reality is most of those guys don't have the confidence to talk to the level of client that I talk to on a regular basis.
That's right. That's exactly right. I have the same experience. I mean, when I see them at trade shows and things, and I mean, it's all around. It's just a wrong thing to do to lowball. It's just wrong all around for the client, for the industry, for the videographer, for your colleagues. It's just a nasty thing to do.
It really is if your intention is to lowball, is in fact to lowball. And that's why I think if you have a rate that's somewhere in line with industry standard, that's what you quote. But if you have to negotiate from there to get the job, I don't think that's lowballing. I don't consider that lowballing.
Right.
I mean, if somebody calls and says, I say, man, my rate's $1,000. They say, we're a church, we're a nonprofit, and really all we can do is $500. Then I'm going to think in my head, man, that's really low. But I'm also looking at a day that's empty when you need me, and if you can go ahead and cut me that check, then I'll do it. And to me, people can, that might aggravate somebody if they knew that I did that. But guess what? That's $500 in the grocery part of my budget.
That's right.
And that's the kind of thing that I ask people all the time. I got into it with a videographer a while back, and it was kind of on the same discussion. And I said, okay, we were actually sitting in my office in the conference room, and I pulled a $100 bill out, and I laid it on the table, and I said, how much would it cost you to, or what would you charge me for 2 or 3 hours of editing? And he told me, it was going to be like $300 or something. So I laid a Benjamin down on the table, and I said, if I told you that what I needed was going to take you 3 hours, and all you had to do was pick that $100 bill up off the table, and the deal was done, would you? He's like, well, of course I would. And I said, it's the same concept.
Yeah.
It's like, if it's in front of you and you can take it, take it. If you have the opportunity to.
That's right.
And, but again, it's supply and demand. I mean, you shouldn't work for $999 if your rate's $1,000, if you're hopping. I mean, if you've got 40 plus hours a week of billable work, I mean, you ought to be charging $1,500 a day just to make sure that you can get a decent night's sleep so that you're not killing yourself.
Exactly right. All right, Kris, well, thank you for coming on the DV show and giving us your insight. We got a lot of amens there in the chat room about what you have to say, and me just listening to you know your stuff. And I've got to say, you have a lot of experience in this, and you know what you're talking about. And when I said at the beginning of the conversation here, is that you know your stuff. This is not just all head knowledge. You've went out and you've actually done some of this. Now, I was monitoring the chat there briefly, and Some of you think this is complicated in charging rates. Well, it's okay to set rates, to have a rate card and to, set the rate, but not everyone is going to want to pay that. And basically the whole gist of this conversation with Kris and what I got out of him was perception. It's important. By you putting out a rate of, say, $1,200, you're telling people that, hey, you mean business. You're right up there with the market, and you're going to do quality work. If you lowball or if you have a lower price, I know some videographers who do jobs for $300, which to me is kind of pathetic. You're better than that. It's not worth your time to do something for $300 or $500. I mean, you can, if, like Kris was saying, if it's a client where it's going to be a shorter video and you're going to be there for one day, which is something, this is something that you shouldn't be doing because this is the type of client that you don't want. But believe me, if you're charging $300 or $500 and this is the type of client base that you have, that's not being an elite videographer. You're looking for someone who can pay you more for the work that you do because you are worth it. You're better than that. It's not worth your time to deal with someone who's going to be paying you less than at least $800 an hour, $800 a gig, at least. And as Kris was talking about, thank you, by the way, Kris. He hung up the phone. We wanted to talk to him, but can you try to get him back? Okay. We'll try to get Kris back on the phone so we can answer some questions on what to charge. But this is not complicated. You're dealing with a client. You're negotiating with a client. And negotiation is sometimes complicated to some, but some others, when you start doing it a little more, negotiation should come naturally. I mean, we negotiate on a daily basis. I mean, you're looking for gas prices. You're negotiating. So this is the same kind of technique that we're using. And Kris knows his stuff. You can find him at mindyourvideobusiness.com. He's been on the show numerous times, and he knows what he's talking about. Man, we are getting into this webinar. It's almost coming to 10 o'clock. So 8, 9, 10, we've been into this 2 hours, and I want to get into my market and what I talk about, what I charge per video, and what I actually do in my area. I want to get this with you. I want to talk about the production timeline and all of this other good stuff. But we're going to save this for tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. We're going to talk about the business model that I have, what I charge, how I deal with clients, and I use some of the knowledge and information that Kris has provided. And we'll get into this more 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. But this is the time right now. Let's take a little bit of time here to answer some of your questions. I hope you've been listening to this webinar. I know some of you find this boring or complicated, which it should be. But this is a learning process, and that's why we're all here. That's what this webinar is all about. So if you guys have any questions, yes, mindyourvideobusiness.com. Elite equals money. Higher paying clients are a lot better to deal with, believe me. I've had my share of low paying clients, and during tough times, I had to take them, and they're not the best to deal with. They don't understand what you're talking about. Sometimes they drop the account. It's just a mess. So if you guys have any questions, any concerns, I know I've been monitoring the chat here. You guys have had some questions there. I'm going to open up Skype. I know I didn't do this the other day, but I'll do it right now. So if you want to call me on Skype and talk and chat and talk about some questions, what you think about the webinar so far, Skype me at The DV Show, and I'll put that down right here, The DV Show. And yes, the webinars are going to be ready by the end of the day today. We want to have everybody listening all at the same time. It's part of this little thing that we engineered here. So yes. Oh, you're very welcome for very welcome. 61982. I hope it is going very well. Yes, we have a bunch of stuff on tap for the weekend here. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about my market, how much I charge. I know this is off of the agenda, but we're going to talk about this because we don't have time to do it today. Talking about dealing with the do-it-yourself client tomorrow. And we're also going to get into talking about what to charge for your client. We can get more into that. And, of course, we have some special guests on tap for the weekend. Ron Dawson. We're going to be giving away some books tomorrow. His brand new book. It's called Refocus. So you got to stay tuned for that. We're giving away 22 copies of this book. 22 copies of Refocus. And that's almost everyone in this room. So you're going to get a copy of this book, believe me. And if you don't, we'll have another drawing down the line. So as part of attending this webinar, Refocus is basically some of the information that we're talking about here within this book, so you have something to carry with you. So we have the archives, the video, we have a PDF document of what we're talking about here, and Ron Dawson's book. There's no excuse for you to go out there and start making some serious income. Now, again, we're going to leave this part of the webinar open for your questions or comments. What do you think so far? What do you think so far of this webinar? Do you like what's going on? Are you offended? I want to know you're offended about what we're talking about. I want to know you're offended about the sales mode. Yeah, you'll be here, Pete and KC. That's great, great stuff. Thank you very much. The music library, we're working on this music library. Believe me, we had so many orders for the music library, we're just not able to keep up. We're dealing with a company right now that's doing the DVDs for us. They're actually data DVDs, and the data DVDs are being sent out. So we're doing this. We're also going to try to make the library available for download on our website. Yeah, we're getting into the meat of this stuff, yes, and there's more to come. Tomorrow we got more meat, and the day after that we got more meat. Justin Foster, I cannot wait to see this guy. He's coming up. He's coming up. He's going to be talking about the psychology behind video that sells, and you will be amazed on what this guy found out. It's called the FOG method, and you're going to be amazed. It's going to change the way you create video. All this weekend, coming up into Monday, we're going to be talking about all this stuff. Yep, cold calling is tough, but if you want to make it to the range of $8,000 to $10,000 a month, you have to cold call. That's what I do. I hate cold calling. But once you start building a rapport with people, especially in your area, and once you dominate your market, those cold calls will be a snap. People will know who you are, and it won't be cold anymore. The webinar is worth more than the premium price. Huh. Okay. Yes, phishing does take time, but you can put a system in place that even if it takes a while, you can create a reliable pipeline. Yes, you can create a reliable pipeline. Phishing does take time, and it does create a reliable pipeline. I would suggest doing phishing and hunting, a combination of the two, depending on where your business is at, depending on where your clients are. You should be dealing with a lot of clients on a monthly basis, even in this economy. 40 calls equals 6 interviews equals 1 close. Yeah, well, that's how it goes. That could be $3,000 in your pocket. Depends. You need to do both. Yes, Chef Mark, you need to do both. You need to do both. And I will charging more for membership. No. Yeah, maybe we can do a webinar about phishing. Yes, we could do that. We're going to get Dan Turner back on the phone tonight, and we kind of lost Kris Simmons. Yeah, we did lose Kris Simmons. We wanted to get him back on the show so we can talk to him, but tonight we will try to get both of them back on as kind of a recap of what we've been talking about today so we can chit-chat with them and ask them questions. I know Kris Simmons always wants to have questions asked to him. Don't let Brian know he's too cheap. Yeah, well, anyway, any more questions in the chat room here? I was planning to sell my car to get a good camera, but then how do I get the clients? Yeah, you know, I deal with so many videographers, so many people on the show in my career that watch the movie Field of Dreams and agree with it. Build it and they will come. Many of us are so focused on equipment. Equipment is important to have, but gaining money being focused on equipment is not going to happen. Tonight can be archived as well. Hunt and fish. What if you are a vegetarian? Well, you can go pick fruit. How's that? If you're a vegetarian, start picking some fruit. You have a whole tree in front of you. Start picking. Yeah, as a newbie, this is a bit overwhelming. Yes, it should be. It should be. It's like you're a piece of clay, and you're spinning around, and we're shaping you, and shaping you, and shaping you, and it's gonna hurt, and you're gonna be shaped. You gotta stretch yourself. This is what this is designed to do. That's what this webinar is designed to do, to stretch and shape you, to expand your head and mind. All right, tomorrow morning, we're gonna go into my model here and what I charge. We're going to answer some more questions. We've got Ron Dawson on tap. We're going to give away some books tomorrow, so tomorrow's going to be a big day. We may even talk to Justin Foster tomorrow. We're having a little schedule conflict with him, so he might be here tomorrow. He definitely will be here on Sunday, but we're working on getting him here tomorrow. I'm looking forward to speaking with him because I love the psychology behind video that sells. I love having control over the content and to actually have video that persuades someone to buy someone. Yes, 8 a.m. tomorrow. 8 a.m. tomorrow. That's when we'll be here. It's Saturday, 8 a.m. Yes, 8 a.m. If that changes, again, keep the webpage bookmarked. All updates will be on there. Eastern Time, yes. Right now, Eastern Time, it's about 9:52. All right. If you guys don't have any more questions, let's give this session a close. It will be archived for later viewing and listening. And just want to clarify that the forms that Dan was talking about, that will be made available for free as a download. The videographer service agreement that we were talking about, that will also be available as a download. So you can download this stuff for free as part of being a premium subscriber. And go ahead and tell your friends about this webinar. Go tell everybody about it so they can sign up and learn and get into this. Now, keep in mind, we have more webinars on track. Our next one is Becoming a Final Cut Pro Ninja. That's our next webinar. So until tomorrow morning, we'll see you. Actually, we'll see you tonight and then tomorrow morning for a new session. We'll see you then. Thank you for listening. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.